Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima, virtual production, and related technologies. My name is Phil Rice, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Tracy Harwood and
Hello.
Damien Valentine.
Hello.
Ricky's not with us this month, but he will be back next month. So we're going to talk freely about him behind his back and take advantage of that opportunity.
We always do.
Yeah.
We always do. That's right. Usually it's, after the show in the off-week meetings that Ricky doesn't know about.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive right into our pick for this month. This is one that Tracy picked out. I don't know if I know how to pronounce it, Tracy, so I'm going to let you do so.
Okay, so this one's by Syama Pedersen, original version, which was recommended to us actually by Cloud, whose Kit Bash award-winning film we reviewed last month. Now, there's actually a disclaimer with this and with the link in particular, because the chat on whose channel you can find it on YouTube highlights that it's not his work, but he is hosting it nonetheless. I think actually unofficially, because the video was removed from Syama's channel in order to comply with Games Workshop's Warhammer 40K's T's and C's. Now the film's, yeah, exactly. I'll come to that in a minute. This particular version of it has been edited into one story. It's actually a 13 minute long, quite long machinima, and it was originally in 4 separate videos, I believe. Now the plot thickens here because the film was released a couple of years ago, and on Astartes channel, about the same sort of time that this was released, Syama announced that the project was going to continue under the Warhammer stable, as he was going to be taking up a job working with Games Workshop. Now, since then, there's not really been any more work that's come out from this creator, or at least that's been openly accessible. And furthermore, there seems to be a bit of a consensus that eventually, wherever this is on the internet, this will get taken down from YouTube and may even be put behind a paywall for community members only, which will really be quite a pity, because it's a beautifully rendered piece of work, does a great job of showcasing the game, and I think it really will be a pity if it goes missing. But as Cloud said to us when he shared the film with us, it's definitely one worth having a look at sooner rather than later. Now to the film, for me, this has really quite good editing, and its sound design is spectacular. It obviously it kind of taps into the whole kind of game lore of Warhammer 40K, and I think it has a bit of shades of Darth Vader in it in places too. But actually, the story stands up even without kind of knowing any of the Warhammer kind of lore. It's about an attack on a ship by a group of super soldiers who appear to have mysterious powers, and they're there to capture something, an artifact or an object that they clearly kind of desire for some what appears to be nefarious purposes. There's very little speaking in it, just a point at which this kind of magical object seems to kind of incant some sort of spell to defend itself, and another character seems to be a sort of well, they seem to be some sort of witch, and they kind of appear to be invoking some kind of defense to the object. The colors of the world, I think, are pretty amazing. The detail of the animation is incredibly engaging, and even though there are these sort of animated assets, the movement and the tale could actually really be almost live action. And that is until right at the very end, when there's this kind of interesting process of absorption into this object, which then kind of results in the soldier being transported to a different world. But overall, I think it's a really well done machinima. It's got great pace and timing. Could almost be the premise of a new Netflix series, which is no doubt what Games Workshop thought too. And who can't blame them really for wanting to take on Syama directly. I think it's really impressive with the scene where you see the soldiers, for example, walking, and the sound is absolutely in sync with the movement, which overall I think I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So I just wanted to say to Cloud, thanks for highlighting this one to us. I hadn't actually seen it or heard of it. It's a really great pick. There is one thing I want to say though, before I hand over to you guys, see what you think. I think what's particularly interesting here is that once again, we're witnessing these fab creators getting snaffled from their community into jobs for the games developers. And it's something really that changed the whole emphasis of machinima back in 2008 when it happened the first time around. And it's what gave rise to machinima.com folks focusing on their money-making machine rather than the quality of great stories. And I, for one, certainly hope that we're not seeing history repeat itself here. And in some ways, actually, I'm sure that won't be the case because the platforms like Unreal seem to be really committed to enabling indies to remain indie and yet benefit directly from their creative work. And if you want further evidence of that, you only have to look at Epic's announcement about its Fortnite creators keeping a substantial portion of their profit that was commented on at GDC just last week as we're recording here. Like I said, I can recall the last time that this happened, and it took a lot of guts for those who wanted to remain indies to continue to remain indies. And one of those, for those that are not aware, was actually Hugh Hancock, who above all else was passionate about making creative work rather than actually making money out of that creative work. Anyway, what did you guys think?
The aesthetic of it, you mentioned you were kind of reaching for, kind of a Darth Vader-ish or that type of thing. For me, the thing that it most evoked was Prometheus, which is the movie in the Alien series, especially with the characters in this when they were revealed, and some of the larger form characters. And also the way that things are lit as well kind of reminded me of that, and this kind of sense of dark, almost foreboding that kind of is woven through the whole thing. Reminded me a lot of that. Very engaging. The sound and music are the definite stars here. The way that the score and the sound design worked seamlessly together to carry this forward was really really impressive stuff. I was a little bit less impressed with the editing. And just to clarify, I am someone coming at this who knows absolutely nothing about the backstory and mythology of what is it, Warhammer 40K? Is that what it is? See, I didn't even know what game it was. I knew it was a game, or at least based on a game IP, but I've never played it. I know nothing about it. And it's interesting. One of the challenges of a film with virtually no dialogue is how to carry the story forward. And it's very challenging. And the fact that I'm sure that the challenge that was increased here for me as a viewer by the fact that they're leaning on some existing IP. So that's going to tend to make it much more challenging for the filmmaker to make something that is going to be digestible by someone who doesn't have any of that background. And maybe that's not even their objective, Maybe it's purely a fan film and that's it. And if so, then I wasn't their target audience. And that should, so take what I say with a grain of salt because of that. But there's certain, the editing was strong for the most part, but there's a certain disorientation that can happen. What we call the cinematic language is that for a reason. It evolved over more than a century, where the order of shots and the shot selection that's done, I can't name specific rules that were broken. I don't think they did. Like I don't even know the names of the rules. That's how much of an idiot I am. But I can't point out specific like academic no-nos. But there was a certain sense of, there were times when watching it that I kind of felt lost about where I was. And I was watching intently and paying a lot of attention to it. And maybe that's just that I didn't get it. But some of it too, I think some of the onus for that is on the filmmaker too. So there were some things there that I think could have been tweaked and could have been better. But I was able to get a good general sense of the story, or at least I thought I did. I think, Tracy, your synopsis that you gave just now is clearer and lines up more with the story than the one that I read when I clicked through on some links to look up information about this film afterwards. And they have an official synopsis. Assaulting an enemy vessel, the Adaptus Astartes. Am I saying that right? Or is it like French
whatever,
Astarte? Astartes. I don't know. Face hordes of foes, cunning witchcraft, and terrifying unknown technology as they seek to bring rebellious enemies to justice.
Yeah, that made no sense to me.
No.
In terms of what I read. So I just made mine up.
Yours fits. This whole sense of rebellious enemies, that's an intriguing premise, but there's no attempt to give any sense of real identity to the attackers or the defenders in this. I honestly feel like one could watch this and assume that the guys invading to the what did you call them, super soldiers?
Yes.
The guys that were actually landing and doing the assault, are they the bad guys or the good guys? You could make a case either way that and maybe it's neutral, maybe neither of them are, but there was no sense at all of why they wanted this object, this sphere. Was it stolen from them and they're reclaiming it?
No
Is
idea.
it something that's not rightfully theirs, but they're jealous of its power and they're just going to take it because they have the power to do so? There were some questions there that, for me, who I'm an admirer of story well told, kind of left me a little unsettled of I'd like to have some indication of that. And they wouldn't have had to necessarily do dialogue to convey that. There's a pick that we'll be talking about in an episode in a few weeks. That's one that I picked called Patient Zero, that I feel like it in another venue, it would be very interesting to do a comparison between the two films on that basis of how the story is conveyed and comes across and how much it relies on existing IP and that kind of thing. Because they're two, I won't say similar stories, but there's commonalities in plot line. Guys are coming to the place to get the thing and or to get to take out the enemies or whatever. And who's the good guys, who's the bad guys? And this one has some ambiguity there that probably wouldn't be there for someone who knows the lore of the game.
Yeah,
I'm going to fully admit that. Maybe to someone who's knows the lore of the game, to them that's as obvious as watching a video from Doom. You watch Doom, you don't ask who the bad guys are. It's pretty clear, right? Half-Life 2, it's kind of pretty clear who the bad guys are and who aren't. So maybe the lore clears that question up, but for me it was a big question mark, and so I kind of had this sense of I'm not sure how to feel, about this, and then the object at the end, that was very cool. Kind of we were talking before the show about different types of the horror genre, and there was very much a sense of that. These guys getting mutilated and then absorbed into this thing and spit out into another dimension. It was quite creepy, even as I was going, what the hell is actually going on here? I don't understand what I'm seeing, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, so I have no complaints in that regard. One of the things that this film got me thinking about, because of some stuff that I've worked on in the past and because of some stuff I'm working on now, is the challenges of telling what's essentially a silent film story. There's, when you're not going to have expository dialogue telling you answering these questions that I had watching this, then you're very limited into how you can do that. There's only so much you can do visually when it's in such a foreign time and place like this. It's different when it's, you don't need that kind of help with a Charlie Chaplin film. because they're settings and character types that we just implicitly recognize because they're very similar to us. This is another world, another universe, and so there's no dialogue to really tell you what's going on. Nothing substantial. They didn't use like on-screen text, the Star Wars role, or Blade Runner's initial text. You have to do that for a movie like Blade Runner, right? You can't just throw people into it and hope they get it. There has to be something. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the original Blade Runner, when it was theatrically released, had Decker, which is Harrison Ford's character, doing voiceover a lot through the film.
Oh.
The director's cut, which was released quite a bit later, doesn't have any voiceover narration. The director's cut's much better. It's much better because it's a real cheat, to do that. I've had a lot of conversations about this with other filmmakers too, about so how do you get that job done of telling the story? And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer would have been as to how they could convey those things, but I think maybe the reason there's those holes in the story is because there's a backdrop to this story, that lore, that it's just assumed that going into this. And I guess that doesn't make that a flaw of this film, but it's something worth thinking about when you're telling a story. And with regard to your audience, do you want people who don't have that, who didn't see the prequel, do you want them to get what's going on or not? And it is an artistic decision, it's perfectly legitimate to just say, hey, this is for people who know this universe, if someone made a Star Trek fan film or stuff, they're not going to go through and explain how teleporters work like they did in Star Trek the motion picture. They don't need to do that. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows what the Enterprise class ship is. Everyone knows what the general mission of Starfleet is. So there's all those things, right, that you don't have to tell in Star Trek fan fiction. Is that what this was? Fan fiction in this universe? I have to assume so, because otherwise it leaves me scratching my head quite a bit, unless I just missed something significant. So again, I'm not berating the film for doing that. That's what it made me think about.
It's really, really good points, Phil, because I think with a lot of machinima, game-based machinima, there is so much that is about the game and folks that know the game world. And when you're trying to sort of change what goes on with that game world, what is it you are taking from the game and conveying in a new way? And to me, a lot of machinima's always suffered from how much lore it takes with it from the game into the film, and whether there's a connection or story tropes within that, and how the audience understands it. And a lot of the machinima that we've seen this year stands up on its own, and I think this is almost a hark back to some of the original types of machinima where it is embedded within the game. I'm assuming, because I'm a bit like you in that sense. I don't know who's the bad guy, who's the good guy, or what their roles or history are, or where the witch came from, or what the technology is and what its magical powers are and all that sort of stuff. But I looked at it as a story, as a standalone thing. And I think I got drawn in by the colors and the soundscape design and the movement and the general direction of flow.
I did too. Yeah.
Which
is
was
a
good
very
enough,
intriguing world that they've exposed us to, with this kind of mix of sci-fi and yet there's magic, I guess is what you'd call it. In the description they gave, it was witchcraft.
Magic,
there's definitely a sense of that, of maybe some of this isn't even technology. It's something that wouldn't necessarily fall into that category. It's something otherworldly or supernatural or whatever. I didn't mind the ambiguity about that. Frankly, I think that the Star Wars universe would have been much better served if they'd have left the Force in that category of something mysterious and supernatural, instead of, with the prequel movies, they kind of tried to scientify, whatever the word is, the whole thing. Oh, it's midichlorians. It's this scientific thing. It's the way cells do. No, don't do that. Leave it
I noticed that
alone,
was
man.
very quickly forgotten after that.
Yeah. Yeah, for good reason.
Mm.
So no, I like that. I like that mystery. But and that's a good point too, is that it is okay to have some things unexplained in your movie, in your short.
Mm.
In fact, one could argue that's a very valuable tool to use,
Absolutely.
you know, because it gives this sense of expansiveness beyond what you're seeing on the screen. So it's challenging and fun
Yeah.
to figure out where you want to draw those lines and all that. But I think for the things where I feel like it suffers when there's ambiguity is when it comes to even just basic indications of who are these people and why are they doing what they're doing. Is that too simplistic to
No.
fixate on? You know, it's that's really what it comes down to. Is I don't need you to tell me how to feel about them, but I would at least like to know a little bit about why they're doing what they're doing. And that remained a big question mark for me. That's why I'm going to assume it's so obviously missing that I'm going to assume that it's because it's told somewhere else in just a part of the story that I'm not exposed to. That's the only reasoning I could come up with. I don't think that it's an omission from the point of view of somebody who knows the whole lore. They're probably shouting at the screen right now if they're watching, going, "Come on, man! It's the Ziggurnauts against the such and suches, and that's just how they, you know, these guys are the bad guys. Everyone knows that, you know." There's probably like a whole thing like that where
Oh yeah.
I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. But what I'm trying to call attention to is what you mentioned too, Tracy, of that sometimes your viewer is not going to have that benefit, and you know, maybe it's worth paying due attention to that. And maybe even after paying attention to it, you decide, you know what, I don't have time to retell the whole story of the Warhammer universe, you know.
Yeah.
And my answer to that would be, you don't have to tell the whole thing. You know, did the original Alien movie tell the whole story of how those eggs and creatures became there that they found? And, you know, no. But
And I think it's better for it that they didn't.
It was better for it. That's right. Yeah. If no other Alien movies had ever been made, that movie would still be extraordinary. In fact, maybe more so.
Yeah. I think
that's the old guy talking, though.
Yeah.
It was great. They were a complete mystery until Alien Covenant, when they explained where the eggs came from. But before that,
was their midichlorians moment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't need that.
On. No.
They were terrifying when you didn't know where they came from. It was just some crash ship there, and you don't know if there's other crash ships on other planets, which is exploited in comics and games because obviously they did that. But you don't know who that ship belonged to, because even the ship itself is terrifying, because you don't know how it's associated with the aliens. It's a very sinister design, and I probably shouldn't be talking about Alien. We're not.
No, but I think it evokes
kind of relevant though, isn't
a
it?
similar atmosphere. Yeah.
I think I never really got to Warhammer myself, but I have friends who are really into it, so I know bits and pieces from listening to them talking about it. My understanding is there are no good guys in Warhammer. Each faction is just as awful as the others.
Okay.
So I don't really know much about them. I don't know what the witch thing. I don't know what the artifact was. I just know that they're all bad guys. Bad guys fighting bad guys. Okay. But yeah, I think, Phil, you're right. This is designed for people who are very familiar with that game world, so they can watch it and know instantly what everything was and what it all meant. We're not that. But I did really enjoy I enjoyed the video as it was. I didn't necessarily understand all the lore side of it, but I thought it was very impressively made. All the animation, the visuals, I thought the sound was good. It kind of drew you in. The artifact thing was really creepy, in a way that, based on what I know of the world, felt right. I think for a Warhammer fan, this is going to be a really good fan film, and they'll get a lot out of it. I got enough out of it because I was really impressed by the technical side of it, and I did want to. I never got around to doing it to show it to one of my friends who is really into Warhammer. To say, can you explain some of this to me? Because I enjoyed it, I can follow what's happening, but I'd like some questions answered about what things are, and see if what they can come back with. Because it's a tabletop war game, so you have the little figures and you paint them. They're about that big, and people paint them and glue them together, paint them, and play sort of games with their friends. And then there's the lore with this book. There's loads of books about that thick each, thousands of pages each, and there's lots of them, and it really goes into everything. And a couple of people tried to get me to read them. I thought, I don't really want to read all this stuff. Yeah.
I never got into the Warhammer games either, and I think that the reason for that is that when I had a PlayStation 1 in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, there was a game released for PlayStation that had a similar name. I don't think it was Warhammer, but it was War something. And it was like this really awful Lord of the Rings clone, with orcs and goblins, and you have your army. But I mean, mind you, PlayStation 1. So yeah, if you can remember what that experience was like, it's like almost slightly better than like DOS game graphics,
Yeah.
And the game was horribly buggy. It kept crashing and resetting, and there was really no way to win the game. I wish I could remember the name of it because it's just comically bad. Just a horrible game.
It might have been a Warhammer game because there's the futuristic sci-fi setting and there's the fantasy setting. They're both called
So
Warhammer.
Maybe it was,
yeah.
But it was nothing like this, But every time I see Warhammer, that's all I think of. That bad taste in my mouth from that game. I can't believe I spent $30 for that game 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So anyway,
you've not sold it. I have to say, you've not sold it. Do you know what though? What makes me laugh here is that I also found a machinima review or a review of this film, which basically had somebody narrating what everything was that was going on inside the film, who the characters were, and so on and so forth. And not only is it an explainer, but it's by a guy called Thor, who says he's sick to death of answering questions about what this game is about. And I think really,
send me that link.
Yeah, I will do.
I would love to see. It's like watching this with subtitles. That would be fantastic.
Yes, it would very well. I watched it like that, right? And then I thought, no, this can't be right. This can't be the thing that was meant to be seen. But there is this kind of explainer video of this main film that we're reviewing. So if you are equally,
I need this film mansplained to me. That's what it comes down to. I need mansplaining for this video because I had some trouble following it. So I would enjoy that a lot.
All right, I'll send you
that to me as well, please.
Okay, I'll do that.
Great pick, Tracy. I think Ricky would have really enjoyed this movie too.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm sure he probably has watched it or he'll get to. It's good. Again, with all the thoughts and distractions that I had related to not understanding the story or whatever, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I mean, it was riveting, just visually very interesting. And yeah, made me want to know more. So I guess that's all you could ask from a movie like this.
Absolutely. And thanks to Orange Cloud for this one.
Yeah, great recommendation.
If something goes back to Star Wars, because obviously 3 of us were introduced to Star Wars with the original trilogy. Then the prequels came out, and that was the introduction to a lot of people to Star Wars with them. And again, with the sequels, there's a lot of people with the introduction. But it's not just the films. There's the Clone Wars cartoon series. Some people, that was their introduction to Star Wars, and they have to design it in a way that the writers know that the kids are going to be watching this as the first time they see anything Star Wars. So they have to present it in a way that's easy for people to get into. And of course, you've got the Rebels cartoon series, you've got the Mandalorian, and all the other shows that are coming out. each one of those,
the Star Wars Christmas special.
Yeah, that
was aired once on television, right?
Yeah. So each of these projects has the potential to be the first time someone is introduced to Star Wars, and you have to do it. They're fully aware that they have to present it in a way that people can very quickly understand who the bad guys are. Like, it's obviously the stormtroopers are the bad guys, and Darth Vader, or whichever era it's set in, and who the good guys are, and what it's all about. And it's kind of back to what you were saying earlier, Phil. In the official productions of Star Wars or Warhammer or anything else, they're going to think about that. But when it's a fan production, they don't have to worry about it because they are marketing it specifically for other fans. So they're not keeping it in mind. Whereas we've watched it as our first big real introduction to the world of Warhammer 40k. And
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah.
Funny aside, but my grandmother, she got to see the original Star Wars in the theater for its original theatrical release. So what year was that? 77.
Yeah.
She fell asleep 30 minutes in the theater.
Yeah.
I was so mad when I learned that, because of course I wasn't old enough to go to the theater then when it came out, and she fell asleep.
There are some films I could see it is possible to fall asleep in the cinema watching. Star Wars with all the sound effects and things blowing up, I don't know. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great episode. Great pick, Tracy. And thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you in our next episode.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.